8:32 at KPEL. Welcome back to Acadiana's Morning News. You hear him every month on the Ask the Governor show, but he's up a bit earlier this morning to talk to us. Governor John Bel Edwards, good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
Oh, Rob and I are doing well, Gov, and thank you so much for making some time for us this morning. We appreciate a lot of important stuff to talk about, really.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, I do want to get to your Cuba trip and the FEMA deadline, which is coming up, but I wanted your comment. This is something that has come up a lot, especially given the oil industry and the situation we have on this end. Yesterday, the news that your administration has reworked the contract with a group of lawyers who are handling the lawsuit against the oil and gas companies regarding the coastline. Can you tell us a little bit about that? You're asking for AG Jeff Landry's okay on this, but what's some more details for our people here?
Well, as you know, when I became governor, there were, I think, 3 parishes that had already filed lawsuits against oil and gas companies for coastal erosion damages in their parishes, and I think one additional parish, Vermilion, filed afterwards. When they filed those lawsuits, they didn't just file them for themselves. They also, by law, had to say that they were filing for the state of Louisiana, too. And so one of the decisions that I made early on, and that the Attorney General made, too, was that we would intervene into those lawsuits to protect our own interest. Now, when you do that, you also have to have legal representation in these cases, which are pending in multiple parishes across South Louisiana, and there is not a procedural device to consolidate them. Mm-hmm. So they're going to continue on in different parishes at the same time against some of the defendants are the same, but some are different depending on which parish you're talking about. And so it became obvious to me that we needed an experienced team of lawyers who have successfully litigated similar claims against the oil and gas industry in the past in order to protect our interest. And so I assembled a team of lawyers who I'm comfortable will be able to do that.
So the big part about it, though, is the limit on the fees, because that's something we talk about a lot with class action lawsuits, is that some of these attorneys, not these specifically that we know of, but some of these attorneys make a living on keeping these things in litigation.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's accurate, because the attorneys who represent plaintiffs, they don't make anything until the litigation is concluded. But if you look at the first contract that we had, the hourly rate was $225 an hour. And the only way there would be a deviation from that if it was in accordance with law. The law is set forth in Louisiana statute that actually sets a maximum hourly fee of $500. But the contract that I had negotiated with the attorneys was for $225 an hour. We have reworked the contract just to clarify some things. We didn't really substantively change any provisions. We just made it very clear as to the basis on which these attorneys are going to be working.
All right. And I think, what is kind of the end to this? I know a lot of people call in and are really concerned that this pending litigation is keeping companies from investing here. Do you obviously take that into account, obviously, with different decisions made, especially in this matter?
Well, we do, but at the same time, we have a huge problem in Louisiana with coastal erosion. We have a restoration plan, but that plan is very expensive to implement, and eventually we're going to turn to the taxpayers around the country, and we're going to ask Congress for additional money to help restore our coast. I don't believe we're going to be in a position to do that in good faith and with any chance of success if they say, well, wait a minute, what have y'all done yourselves to address this situation? And we have an industry, and you know, everybody, myself included, we want the oil and gas industry in Louisiana. We want them to be very successful. We want them to be profitable. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. But we do believe that the exploration and production activities, in many cases along the coast, violated permit requirements and regulation and law, and have resulted in coastal erosion. And so, you know, we believe that it's appropriate. And in fact, there are documents, studies that were commissioned by the industry itself that show this. And so we believe the prudent thing to do is to move forward with the litigation that's pending. And by the way, I would love to sit down with the industry and work out a solution. I've already made an attempt to do that. I will do it at any time, and we can figure out what is a reasonable solution, and then give them an opportunity to structure those payments out into the future. If they were inclined to sit down and talk to me. When I was running for governor, I said I would do that. I have done that. We were not successful, but I'm willing to resume those discussions at any time.
So let's talk about your trip. Obviously, you were down in Cuba. Just given the fact that we have such a huge port in New Orleans, even to some extent in Baton Rouge, we're in a very good position as far as trade.
Close, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Trade in the Caribbean and different places like that. Do you see us now that some of the blocks have been lifted, that trade increasing?
Well, yes, but I don't believe anything has happened yet that allows that trade to increase in any significant fashion.
In the future.
But the trend is certainly in that direction. I think public opinion in the United States is changing rapidly, especially among second and third generation Cuban Americans. And we've already normalized relations, but the embargo is actually statutorily created by Congress. And unless and until that is removed or at least partially removed, it's going to be very difficult. But what we tried to do with the trade mission, and I think we were very successful, is we wanted to create the relationships and establish the communication necessary so that as we are able to resume what was our historical relationship with Cuba in terms of trading, we want to be in a position to do that. And, you just look at this, that their per capita rice consumption on an annual basis is about 144 pounds of rice. Well, that's about 4 times what we eat here in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And we grow the best rice in the world. The rice that we grow is closer to them than any other rice producers in the world. We just think we ought to be in a position to move rice to Cuba out of our deep water ports all along the coast of Louisiana, whether it's Lake Charles or the port of South Louisiana, New Orleans, whatever. But it takes relationships and communication to do that. We were able to go down and establish those. We signed a memorandum of understanding, and we're going to be following up. And it's not just rice. And by the way, we're eventually going to have to buy things from Cuba too, because if they don't have money, they can't buy.
Yeah.
But they're going to be hard pressed because they don't really have a lot of manufacturing there. It's a country with beautiful people, but they're trapped in a system that is just not working for them. It's failing them, and they're not being propped up to the degree that they used to be by Venezuela and Russia and other countries, and so they are really struggling right now.
Let's talk about continuing recovery from the flooding. The FEMA deadline is coming up, and your shelter-at-home program is obviously taking shape.
That's coming up, too.
Yes.
Boy, and it's quick. Tomorrow's FEMA, right?
Well, I didn't hear that last question there.
I'm sorry. Just so the FEMA deadline is tomorrow,
yes.
and then
yes,
shelter at home will be Saturday, right?
Yes, on the 13th of October, the FEMA deadline. And by the way, we've had about 150,000 claims filed for assistance with FEMA. And now on the shelter at home, that is going to expire on Saturday. And right now we have right at 21,000 registrants for shelter at home, which is a big number, and that program is progressing nicely. I mean, it's challenging. Just the logistics of the program are challenging, but we feel very good about it as part of our overall recovery plan. Of course, this is temporary in nature, but we have a task force created to guide our efforts in long-term recovery. And by the way, Mayor President Joe Robideau is on that task force, and I'm very happy to have him serving.
Yes, absolutely. And, it's just these poor people, I know they're just still trying to rebuild their lives. I know at one point, too, when we spoke, when someone called into your Ask the Governor show last month, you spoke also about trying to help people with some of the mental health effects of this, because your whole life is just uprooted.
No doubt, and one of the things that we asked for, and the White House favorably received the request, but it's for a social services block grant.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the money that you've heard about, the lion's share, is for community development block grant. But there is a social services block grant that is typically made available after large disasters like this to help with things like mental illness and treatment, and because there's a lot of depression out there. People who thought that they had their lives where they wanted them. Their single biggest investment was in their home. They might be on a fixed income, and they were relatively comfortable, and they thought they had everything the way they needed it to be. All of a sudden, they're upside down, and so we're asking for that. We didn't get it, but we're going to go back in the lame duck session and see if we can get the social services block grant. But in the meantime, we are stepping up our efforts, working through the Human Services Authority and others at local government to try to address these needs as they arise. But it is a real problem, and we have too much experience with it in Louisiana. You know, we saw the same thing after Katrina, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is, it can go on for such a long time. Now, let me ask you. We obviously are getting closer to electing someone for the 3rd Congressional District, for the 4th Congressional District, and also for the U.S. Senate. Any idea on what you would like to say to people? We got about 30 days left. 30 days until we have the November 8th election, and then early voting starting on the 25th of October. So any thoughts that you wanted to talk with people about?
Well, first of all, especially because of the presidential race, it seems like a crazy time, and some people may be so turned off that they just decide they're not going to vote. Yeah. I would ask people not to do that. Everybody should take the time to learn about the candidates and the issues and just go cast an informed ballot. And having been to Congress 3 weeks of the last 5, working with our delegation, I will tell you that it's important that regardless of party that we have a delegation that can come together and advance the interests of the state. And by the way, that happened as we were looking for some money from the federal government in order to get started with our recovery, especially as it relates to housing after the March and August flooding. And the lion's share of that work is going to be done in the lame duck